First of all, I'd like to thank you for being here. I know it's Sunday afternoon, I know it's 2 o'clock, and you have other things to do, and you came to listen to me, so I truly appreciate that. The topic we have been agreed upon with other people to what we should talk about is stress. And when I thought about this, I remember back in the 70s and 80s, stress management was a big button. And quite frankly, the talks I went to on stress management and the talks I actually gave on it, I really didn't like particularly too much, because I thought there was something deeper that needed to be addressed. So when I decided to do this talk, I decided to call it How to Make Your Body Stronger Than the Stress You Put It Under, which is really what we're really interested in accomplishing, because it's the adverse effects of the stress, not the ludicrous idea that we're not going to be under stress, because that's just not going to happen. So you've heard this before, I think. It says, stress can kill you. Well, do you think that's true? Okay. Do you get an idea on how it can kill you? There's a little guy with a hammer coming up, and he's stressed, and he just beats you in the head. So I wanted to address this topic a little bit more specifically. Now, I can only be serious for 3 slides. That's all I could tolerate this time. So I will go through some neurological explanation, and then we'll have some fun. The topic that I want to talk about first is the autonomic nervous system. The part of the nervous system is separated into basically 2 parts, called the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system actually evaluates when your body is under stress severely and it's a dangerous situation and it's imminently dangerous. Okay, it's called the fight or flight mechanism. Okay, now you'll see why I picked Tigger. Tigger was a perfect example of the sympathetic nervous system. So I have him being Tigger. So what you get out of that is he's bouncy and bouncy, okay? Out of all the people I could think of to be a perfect representation of sympathetic nervous system, it's Tigger. Hello, Aphit.
Hey.
Come on in. So there's another side to the sympathetic nervous system, or the autonomic nervous system. It's called the parasympathetic nervous system. So the parasympathetic nervous system is the one that your body uses for feed or function. Okay? So the top picture you'd have not enough parasympathetic nervous system. See, he'd rather be sleeping. And down the bottom is that's Eeyore, and he's balanced from a sympathetic and parasympathetic point of view. I will review this a lot more, so don't worry if it doesn't make total sense to you now. It's a pretty complex neurological principle. So guess what? Who this is? This is Eeyore. I forgot to plug the speaker in, guys. Sorry.
You know, I may have just the thing. Up, up, up you go. There you are.
It's an awful nice tail, Kanga. Much nicer than the rest of me. It's not much of a tail, but I'm sort of attached to it. Not much of a house. Just right for not much of a donkey.
Can you get the idea of one is excited constantly, and the other couldn't get excited if anything they could do. So from a sympathetic standpoint, a fight or flight mechanism, you're stimulated by some type of response that's dangerous to you. Okay? Now, if you were looking at the sympathetic and parasympathetic, and this particular, you were in this area, which part of the nervous system would be? Parasympathetic, fight or flight, or feeder function? You're out in this stuff. There's lightning coming down. Which one?
Fight or flight.
Good. The fight or flight mechanism, does everybody agree? Okay, good. Now, I was asked to do a talk one time of chiropractic around the world and what it looked like. Okay, so when I was going through these slides, I was trying to decide if I thought this was sympathetic fight or flight or parasympathetic feed and function. So I seriously haven't had a decision. But anyway, you ready for this? So I think this is Korea. And you yelled at me if it.
Yeah. That was so clean.
Well, why do you cover his face?
It gets better.
Oh, I'm sure glad you're not that bad. I would be going here.
Well, it gets better.
Oh my God. And that's adjustment?
That's an adjustment, yeah. Now, what do you think that is? Do you think that'd be sympathetic?
No, it's parasympathetic.
Or do you think it'd be
I was
parasympathetic?
parasympathetic.
Parasympathetic? Yeah? Okay. I
Not
haven't
for me, it
decided
wouldn't
yet.
either.
Some of it, you know, the only thing it would be, I think that's a little girl, right? And with what he just did, doing that to a guy probably would make it very sympathetic. You get the idea? Now, the Eastern philosophy talks about the autonomic nervous system for a long time. Yang, which is the left side of that symbol, is the sympathetic nervous system. Okay, so we've been talking about this for a long time, and Yin is the parasympathetic side. You can know this, or may have some experience with it, because of yoga. They talk about Yin yoga being relaxation yoga. Okay? So you can see the two sides of this balanced. Now, I want you to consider the fact that your nervous system may have an effect on how you're feeling. Do you think that's true? Right? Okay? So, many times we're given diseases. What do you think that was when it just spun out of the way? Is that sympathetic or parasympathetic? Is that mellow, or is that, oh my God, what the heck happened there? That was a sympathetic reaction. Now, we're going to talk about a concept called block regulation. You've probably, when I work with you, have heard me use this term before. I wanted to actually get you to appreciate what exactly it means. Now we have the autonomic nervous system, and we have the parasympathetic on one side, that's going to respond based on stimulus that would make you want to fight or flight. Okay? Then you have on the other side the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the feed and function. It's going to be heart beating, lungs breathing, kidneys filtering. You get it? And can you see that every second that you're alive, your body has to bounce back and forth based on the stimulus? Look, there are times when your body needs to be fight or flight. There are times when you need to be feed or function. Get out of the way of the truck, eat a sandwich. I was going to say peanut butter and jelly, but we don't do that. Okay? Now, if in fact you get stuck on one or the other, can you see that that could cause trouble for you? Because when you, look, if you're walking down the street and you're eating something, and a truck comes at you, do you think your body cares about digesting whatever food that is? So it's going to neglect the parasympathetic function, yeah? Okay, so you can see that would be tremendously difficult for you as far as being able to digest anything. So we would actually ignore a huge part of your function of your body, okay? That makes sense? This is my attempt at animation here. So does this affect the autonomic nervous system? And what role does it play? Now the next slide I'm going to show you is giving you an appreciation. What I want to do is give you an appreciation of the relationship between the diseases that we sometimes say we have, and I'm not saying 100% of the time it is caused by what you see here, okay? But I want you to consider that can be sometimes. That make sense?
Mhm.
Good. Can you see if in fact your sympathetic nervous system was actually dominant? You just keep eating and keep eating and keep eating, right? Rather than you wouldn't digest anything, just like we talked about. And you would call it some kind of disease. Does that make sense? How many people do you know are labeled with ADHD? Especially little kids, right? That's a sympathetic reaction. Now, we're going to introduce something else. Let's put about 4 or 5 teaspoons of sugar in that kid. Right? Do you think that'll be a sympathetic response? His body would actually feel that it's in danger because it's almost been poisoned. Now how about this, a general anxiety, right? Well, what if your blood sugar dropped to the point where it was getting seriously low? Would that make your body anxious? Seriously. Okay? And again, there are many factors that can occur to cause these diagnoses, but if in fact you ignore the one that's physical, it's a shame. Because if you get this out of the way, okay? Now here's another one, depression, oh my God. Right? But again, sugar relationships, adrenal fatigue, hugely, thyroid difficulties, and maybe the ones that do not show up on blood work. And the obsessive compulsive, I think that would be a bouncing back and forth between sympathetic and parasympathetic with no reason why. And the same thing with this here. Okay, and again I reiterate, it is not the only reason, but it would certainly be a good baseline, a good place to start. Does that make sense? Because it can handle so many untold miseries that the person would have. So it's something to look at. If you look at the physical aspect of things and you recognize that they could have emotional components, it's a huge factor. Deal? Okay. Now this is called the parasympathetic moment. In yoga, I think one of the definitions of yoga is to breathe. So here's what I'd like you all to do. Wait till I finish. Take a big deep breath through your nose, as big as you can. Hold it for about 5 seconds, and then blow out very slowly through your mouth. Got it? Here we go. Big deep breath. Hold it 5 seconds, now blow it out really slowly. Now what do you notice when you breathe out? Does your body go like...
I'm doing it slowly.
Pardon me?
I'm doing it slowly.
There
I
you
love
go.
you.
That's a parasympathetic mechanism. It could help you be more parasympathetic. I think it's why women in labor do breathing. they're trying to be parasympathetic. So this is a tool for you, okay? I know it's ridiculous. Breathe, but it's huge, okay? Deal? Now here's a review. Let's look at the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight. The pupils dilate, right? You get a constant surveillance of the surroundings. You're hypervigilant. That's a diagnosis, right? Your breath becomes shallow. Then your anxiety, right? Or what anxiety disorder? Your heart beats faster. You sweat. You can't sleep. You see? I mean, that's all this stuff does. So if in fact you have a difficulty with the sympathetic nervous system, you could be coming up with all these symptoms. All right? This is out of a physiology book. I didn't write it. And now you talk about the difference between the sympathetic and parasympathetic. Well, one being dealt with as far as stress, and the other being dealt with as function. And the bouncing back and forth between the two is the integral part. Now, anybody ever hear of these guys? They're called the adrenal glands, okay? Now, the adrenals are the last line of defense when you're under stress, and they're the little white guys on top there. They're not bigger than, probably a little bigger than a silver dollar, okay? And they do a whole lot of things, okay? And again, stronger than the stress you put yourself under. If you have adrenal fatigue, you're not stronger than the stress you put yourself under. And interestingly enough, they're only addressed rarely. Okay? Now here's the parts of them. The medulla, which is the middle, that's the one that produces adrenaline. You see something going on that you need to have superhuman strength, you know? And you run over and pick up the car off of the kid. That's adrenaline. That comes from the medulla, the middle. And then the cortex is on the outside. And if you look at the medulla, look, we're looking at blood pressure, we're looking at heart rate, we're looking at sweating. How many people have high blood pressure and they don't know why? They just give them a medication to bring it down, but that doesn't address the problem. It addresses the symptom. And the cortex, right, looks such hormones like cortisol. Does cortisol and cortisone sound the same to you or similar? Right, it's an anti-inflammatory. Look at mineral cortisols. They're talking about blood pressure again. That's levels of salt and potassium. If they go out, your body can die. And it also produces sex hormones, androgen and similar hormones come out of the adrenals. Okay? Now, here's another picture of it. Here's the medulla, right? The fight or flight mechanism. Does this starting to make some sense? Okay? Now, I also added some reasons. What could be sympathetic? Or name each one of these. You got this car accident over here on the left. Is that a sympathetic or parasympathetic response? Yeah. And then you've got some guy spraying poison. Right? What's that? Sympathetic or parasympathetic? Right? And then you got a mouthful of metal. Right? If that's leaking, look, I don't think that everybody needs to get their metal fillings removed. I think it's a good idea, though. I had mine done. It took a year and a half. Because the literature I can read says that 1 ounce of mercury will make toxic 10,000 gallons of water. That's not good. What are they putting in our mouth for? And then my favorite, lamenting when I was a kid, I used to love Twinkies. Oh my God. And now I look at that white stuff and it makes me sick. It also is a sympathetic response too. So you can recognize that these particular causalities are different. You could be putting yourself into a sympathetic dominance by eating a Twinkie. Right? And you're wondering why you feel that, God, I'm feeling anxious. I don't know why. You see what I mean? Not your diagnosis sometimes. It's what you're doing. Okay? Now these activities, what do you think when you get a massage? You think you're going to be sympathetic or parasympathetic? Yeah. All right? And if you're doing yoga, right? And sometimes people, when they get on the beamer, they get parasympathetic. There's little kids getting adjusted over there on the right. And smiling. If all else fails, just smile. Right? Isn't that amazing? And then taking a long walk in the woods is a great idea. I'm not sure taking a long walk on treadmills is parasympathetic. Isn't for me. I like to be outside. Okay? So if we look at the contrast between the two, we can get some kind of a balance, or try to. Now, if you eat a Twinkie and take a long walk, I don't necessarily know it's going to do anything for you. Make sense?
Yeah, it will. It'll burn the calories. You just go for the
Behave now, Ifit. Now, you guys recognize this guy?
Mm-hmm.
That's John Kennedy, right? I wanted to get some, I wanted to make it real to you in relationship to the adrenals and stress. Well, if you remember back in the early 60s, you couldn't get much more stress than he had, okay? And my prediction is he probably wouldn't have lived another 5 years. When he was in the Second World War, he hurt his back really seriously. And about that time, around the times when he was maybe late 50s, early 60s, they were starting to use cortisone as a therapy. And he thought it was great because it made the pain in his back go away. But it also severely damaged his adrenal glands. He got something called Addison's disease. And there's quotes when he talks about, there were days when he couldn't even put his socks on. Okay? So there's a real figure. Now here's something I'd like you to do, is listen to your body. Remember we talked about, from an Eastern philosophy, symptoms are the kindness of your body to tell you what's going on. They're not something that you got to get rid of, right? But they have to tell you. So do you have early morning fatigue? Okay. Does energy drop around 3 or 4 o'clock? Do you have constant fatigue? Do you have an inability to handle stress? Do you have high or low blood pressure? Do you have an intolerance to temperature? I'm always cold. Do you have an intolerance to, do you have mild depression? Do you have sleep disturbances? Do you have dizziness? Are you sensitive to loud noises? I am. I can't stand loud noises. Okay, so
And these are all symptoms of adrenal glands not functioning well.
I'm almost about to say that if it.
I know this
You're
over.
stealing my thunder, kid. Yeah, these are all, seeing the adrenal glands over there on the right. And yeah, these are indications of adrenal fatigue or stress. Okay? And if you can see the relationship between the autonomic nervous system, it's a chicken or the egg. If the adrenals are supposed to respond to something fight or flight and they can't, it gets stuck in parasympathetic. Well, that's a nice truck. Oh well, I guess it's going to hit me. I should tell you this story now. I was on a plane and I was reading an article. They were talking about the frog population going down. Okay? And I said, I'll have to know why the frog population. I'm on an airplane, what the heck? So they were talking about that they did autopsies on tadpoles and they found that their bodies were, they found that there was all kinds of medications in the tadpoles. And they found certain medication that made it so they really didn't care if they got eaten or not. Okay, so they were hyper parasympathetic because when the sympathetic nervous system said, hey, you're going to get eaten, they said, I don't care. Make sense? See, I'll tell you another story in a little while. Okay, so we have major causes of stress, but they're not always that your whatever, your boss. You know, it doesn't have to be something that's totally circumstantial, right? There are other things that can cause stress in your life, like eating a jelly donut. I used to like jelly donuts. Sad that I don't have them anymore. I keep trying to get Jeannie to make donuts, but it doesn't work yet. You know, or going into a garage where cars are, and there's a lot of nasty smells, right? Or do you ever walk down the pesticide aisle in a grocery store or a store? It makes me sick, right? Because my sympathetic nervous system goes, get out of here, right? Try that, not more than once. And here's the factors that can influence the adrenals. Look at them all, right? And it can make allergies, right? Because that's another thing I forgot to tell you about the adrenals. They have a significant role in the immune system function. Well, you know, he's sick all the time, but he's under a lot of stress. That's why. And caffeine, the last thing you want to do is put a bunch of caffeine in your body. If you're sympathetic dominant, you're going to be there more. Does that make sense? Okay. Here's more. Can you imagine? And we wonder why our bodies are so difficult and why we have adrenal stress. Okay? Good. So here's an analogy I like to use. You have the ability to handle so much stress. And depending on how you take care of yourself, will make it so that you have more of an ability to handle stress. But you've got a bag. And if you fill it up with stress, after it overflows, you're going to have adverse effects. So making your body stronger than the stress you put it under, right, is determined by what your health is and what your mental stability is. Some people just freak out over everything. Okay? They're probably hypersympathetic. Yeah? Their diets can be terrible. Every time they put something in their mouth, they make the body worry about what they just did. Or they put coffee in their body all the time. Stimulants are actually like beating a dead horse. I'm so tired I can hardly get up. Well, we got to go back to the health part. What's going on? What's the adrenal function like? What's the thyroid function like? Okay? And there's profound nutritional effects. Profound. Here we are again. What are we going to do? Come on. It's breathe time. I don't want you guys to be sympathetically dominant when we get done here. You get it? So, I don't care if you put this on your computer on a timer. Breathe. I have some patients. Did you breathe 10 times today? They need to. These are the adrenal glands. See the little red guys? Okay? There's more pictures of them. I had to add that. This is something that you may have heard of or may not. It's called the HPA axis. They talk about it a lot. Now look at the top there. They see it says stress on the left-hand side. It says psychological or physical. So if in fact you stimulate the hypothalamus, see that guy on top there? He's the connection between the nervous system and the hormonal system. Right? Women notoriously experience this because they're aware of it. They know that hormones can really affect them emotionally. But their neurological system can actually affect the hormonal system. Does that make sense? Okay? And then the pituitary is the master gland. The hypothalamus tells the pituitary what to do. It does it, and then it stimulates the adrenals. And they're the end result. Okay? And this axis affects digestion. It helps to modulate stress. It affects the immune system. And it promotes healthy sexual functions. Okay, so it's kind of a big guy, but I wanted you to see the relationship between what your nervous system does and what your hormonal system does. Okay, and does that make sense? And everybody knows about cortisol because of their TV commercials, right? They show pictures of women that they look thin on top and look like a pear on the bottom, and it's because of cortisol. Well, that's what they say at least. Cortisol actually is related to stress. Tries to handle stress. But look what it causes with too high levels. Weight gain, high blood pressure, decrease in libido, increased urination, brittle bones, mood swings and anxiety, right? Fatigue, trouble falling asleep and staying asleep, irregular menstrual cycles, and excessive thirst. That's a lot for one guy. So no wonder why we're having difficulties with the stress. No wonder why we need to make it so we're stronger than the stress we put ourselves under. Yeah? So you could make a whole course out of just what cortisol does. Okay? I wrote this because I thought it. We're in a good position to help because what our job is to help you with degenerative changes and help your body heal. All right? Many times when the problem is realized, it may be too late and very difficult to repair. Our intention is to help the body stay healthy. And from this situation, to help the body stronger than the stress you put it under, it's because you're keeping your body healthier. So it's maintain rather than repair. Okay? And because of all the things you may think about that stress causes, this may be a great solution. Now, See, you can't be sick and healthy simultaneously. Make sense? So might as well put your attention on healthy. I love the center little cartoon there. Well, I think you're suffering from an arrow through your head, but we'll do a bunch of tests anyway. Okay? So the obviously is the last thing we ever see, think, or do. So we can help. Now, one of the things that you may have experienced is trying to get a diagnosis can be a nightmare, because look at all the things that can occur from the autonomic nervous system not functioning properly, the adrenals being fatigued. The blood sugar could be a problem, abnormal blood sugar, right? We talked about how anxious you can get, right? The anxiety, right? The confusion. You just don't have the energy to make the brain work, or the depression, or the memory, or the weakness. Can you see that? Loss of endurance, unexplained weight gain. This is a big deal. This is like a lot of people. Okay? And then I had to add this too. Who gets it most? We're number one on the list, doctors. Okay? It's because there's a lot of stress in what we do. And we're trying to handle your stress. Law enforcement officers, they must be getting more lately. But you can see down the line there, they all make sense. And this is just a short list, guys. There's a lot more. But they're number one consecutively. Okay? And then here's adrenal fatigue related to stress. See, it's bad dietary. People thought it was just situational. Right? Not sleeping enough, profound. Drinking caffeine, right? Not exercising enough. Not relaxing. Being overworked, stimulants. Nicotine use, right? Even medications can cause some stress. Look at the side effects that they say. Do you think the body would look at that from a autonomic point of view and have a concern? I don't know, but it could. Does that make sense? Look at all their symptoms, or all the side effects are created. Do you think that could create a problem with the autonomic nervous system? I can't tell you that I have total subjective reality on that, but it makes sense to me. It's kind of like one of those forest and the trees kind of concept. You know? Hi.
What do you mean by using stimulants? Can you give me some examples of
Say that again.
Stimulants. Using stimulants.
Yeah, 5-hour energy drink.
Oh, okay. Okay.
You know? So dealing with stress. Now this is something I actually did unique to this seminar, because I really thought about it and went, okay, so let's deal with stress here. You got the person, one stress is like someone you love dies, or they have a major illness. I mean, that's stronger than the stress you put yourself under. That's when you're going to find out, right? But the ones you can control are changes in diet and sleep patterns and exercise. And it takes months for this to occur, right? Does that make sense? Okay? So, but the first thing that has to do is you have to recognize who you're trying to deal with. And what can I do? I'm trying to make this more causative. Well, I'd better take care of myself. And that's the last time you want to take care of yourself, when you're under a lot of stress. Right? Because you don't sleep. So what I did, I have tried to get people to recognize the profoundness of the stress that they're under and the worry that they're under. Okay? So before I did this seminar, I did some literature research and read these books. And the first one, although it seems a little off the beaten path, it's really not. It's just a brain that changes itself. And what the intention of the book was to confront or deal with a topic called neuroplasticity. In English, that means change, the ability to change. What they thought of the brain before was that it was hardwired. This part of the brain does this, and this part of the brain does this. Well, that's not true. And they're finding out more. You can actually readapt parts of your brain to do different things. Okay? And then the second book I read was something called Mindset. And it talked a lot about how one thinks. It also talked about how things can change. They talked a lot about IQ. And they said, you think it's stuck. It's not. And the way that you think is either on a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. And they talk about it really wonderfully and get you to recognize the fact of how stuck you may be. And if you think about stress from a standpoint of your mindset, right, it can make you more stressful. Every time I'm in this situation, it's going to take me 18 months to find a job. That's stressful. That's a mindset. Thank you. Appreciate that, Michael. Okay. The power of habit. This was one that I was most interested in. Is it talks about how many things we do every day that are habitual, and how many times we actually work on a circuit response mechanism. Now tell me if that can cause some stress or not. This is occurring, so that's what this means. Okay, that's a habit. And it talks about things called triggers. What triggers the habit? And it talks about how to notice a trigger and how to change the habit. And I found that fascinating. Okay? Now the next book is something called Peaks and Valleys. This gentleman, his name is Johnson. I've read 3 of his books now. One was called Who Moved My Cheese? Right? You would think, what a wonderful book. But I haven't found many people be interested in reading it, but it's great. But the second one he wrote here was called Peaks and Valleys. And he said, I like peaks. I don't like valleys. So I'm going to make my life all peaks. 3 months later, he comes back and says, nah, I ain't doing that. Not possible. So my next concept is, I'm going to make peaks and valleys, I'm going to consider them the same way. Because the peaks and the valleys have a benefit to each other. You can have valleys that actually enhance or ingratiate your life, as well as the peaks. And if I handle the peaks, or if I handle the valleys pretty well, I'm going to have more peaks. And if I know how to handle a peak, I'm not going to have as many valleys. It was a wonderful book, okay? But you can see that peaks and valleys, you can look and see if that could create stress in itself. How many times can you be in a peak and go, oh my God, I can't believe I'm here, and that's stressful. And a valley, oh God, I can't believe I'm here, that's stressful. Now, I'm sorry I had to add this book because when I looked at the topic, I went, oh, I just got to read this thing. It's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a, yes, that's what the other 3 letters mean, but I ain't putting them there. I gave a
It's a different word. You put 4 asterisks there, so it's not that word, it's something else.
I gave a copy of this to Paul, just so you know. But what it really talked about, the first part of the book he was trying to be sensational. So he uses that word at least 500 times. All right? And I was almost ready to give the book away. I said, okay, I got it. But the second half of the book, it was actually philosophical. And it was like, okay, so let's look at what you really care about and don't care about and why and what. Is it really stuff that actually I should care about? So again, you could look at it being stressful. Because maybe, and his point of view was, maybe you shouldn't care about it at all. Okay, so I would highly recommend the 5 books that we have on there, and I also would read them in the order that they're actually up there. Okay, because for me, it was actually extremely valuable. And if you get done and you like all those, I have another 5 that you could read easily. Okay? But it really now gives me the point of view that I'm trying to make my body stronger than the stress I put it under. Because I'm not going to run out of stress. And if I have my way, I'm going to have more. Because I have aspirations of what needs to occur. I've already acquired a room that I can have workshops like this that holds 35 to 50 people. Because people need to see this. They don't need to be on the solutions that they're using for stress. It's killing them. Okay? Good. And I even put references there. Now the next thing I'd like to talk about is, okay, so what do we do about it now? What's out there? So the first thing I did was I looked and saw, I actually Googled it. I said, what do you do for stress? And the first thing that came up was talk therapy. Now, I don't have a lot of experience with this, so what I always do is whatever I'm not up on, I don't have to be down on. Okay? I just have to know. And with the first one he talks about that there's psychological therapies alleviate symptoms as effectively as new therapies like cognitive therapy. And the other side of it is there's medical literature has overstated the benefits of therapy versus for depression. So I can give you both sides of the story here, okay? But that's what they do. Then the other thing is that they use medications, okay? And there's the most popular, I Googled most popular medications, and then I Googled what the most popular side effects were. And that little caricature there, I just couldn't help. Okay? But there, I at least found 1,000 articles that talked about pros and cons of doing this. Okay? And I have my own personal opinion, but if you want it, I'll tell it to you sometime. And then the third one, which is the extreme, which is called ECT, which is electroconvulsive therapy. Okay? Now, it talks about that being used, and I can give you, no one's certain how ECT works. We do know that it changes pattern of blood flow through the brain, okay, and may affect depression. There's evidence that it prevents severe depression, and it may help with brain chemicals. Again, I gave you both sides of it. That the amount of information that wasn't happy about it was pages long. So there is some considerable concern. I have a patient who is a psychiatric nurse. She's been doing it for 20 years. And she delivers electroconvulsive therapy, okay? And if you like, ask me about it and we'll talk about this, okay? And what her opinion was. Hi.
Oh, okay. Do you think it's a good idea to do that? No, I'm not gonna do that.
Say that again.
Do you think it's a good idea to do this therapy?
It scares me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't look
Okay, but again, it is not something, it's the forest and the trees from my standpoint, right? If I had a problem, I'd like to do everything I could before I would put myself through that.
Mm-hmm.
They're now using MRI machines to do the same thing, where they're giving you doses of MRI every day. I don't know about that either. Now here's my contrast. If you didn't know, the technique that we use in the office is called nutritional response testing. It's actually muscle testing to determine what we need to do from a physical, nutritional, and structural needs standpoint. Again, it's my understanding of what needs to be done to make your body stronger than the stress you put it under. Okay? And there's relevance to the autonomic nervous system a lot. And then I figured I'd put what vitamins are good for stress. I wanted to play a little bit, so I had to put these little guys on here. GABA I'm just starting to use, I kind of like it. And then here's the herbs. Herbs have a proviso. Anytime you use an herb, you got to have somebody that knows what they're doing, especially if you're using certain medications, especially if you're using certain medications we wrote down before. Okay? But anyway, using nutritional response testing and these particular herbs and supplements, we can help your body be stronger than the stress you put it under. Okay? It's like, look, if there's only 10 tons that the bridge will take and you're trying to put 12 tons across it, you're taking a risk. All right? So either you got to fix the bridge or go across another one. Does that make sense? So here I am. Maybe. Oh, there you go. No, we're not going to let you listen to that because you can't hear it. It says sugar's bad. I mean, if you like to, after we're done, I'll play it for you. But if I was smart enough to put that thing in. Look, I mean, here we go with the autonomic nervous system. On the left side, you're dealing with a live food. Do you think that's going to stimulate the sympathetic or parasympathetic nervous system?
Here.
Yeah, parasympathetic, right? Good. And then if you eat the dead food on the right side, which one are you going to get?
sympathetic.
Huh?
Sympathetic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good. How about anything that you see on this page?
It's all sympathetic.
Yeah, that's all sympathetic. Although I'll tell you, the smell of Cinnabon upstairs in the mall,
I
I
know,
love that
I know.
smell.
But Dr. Mark, I mean, I have a very bad experience with that. I mean, I don't eat all this stuff, but once I went to IKEA. Have you been to IKEA? IKEA in the food court, they
Yeah,
have they have the cinnamon there as well. So we bought a bag and then we brought it home and we ate. I mean, I didn't even eat all of that, and I got such a bad headache after that. I had to lay down. It was a really bad. It's way too much sugar.
Sure.
That was.
And you're pretty sensitive to sugar anyway,
I
isn't it?
am, yeah. And
Thank you
lots
for
of
that
it.
testimonial. Sympathetic reaction. There's aspartame. What do you think, guys? You think you're going to get a parasympathetic or sympathetic reaction?
Sympathetic.
Yeah, because look at all this. Epileptic seizures, for God's sake. My goodness. Okay? So, alternative solution to help your body be stronger in this stress, you put it under. Change your diet. Eat that stuff. Okay? Make sense? Yeah. You know him, Albert? He's a pretty bright guy. I'm starting to read quotes from him. Energy is everything. There is all there is to it. Match the frequency of the reality you want, and you cannot help but get that reality. It can be no other way. It's not philosophy, it's physics. Okay? And from what I recognize, my practice is going more and more into energy medicine. Now, 10 years ago, I would have thought that was too esoteric for me to say to you right now. But I'll tell you what, I had a patient who came from Vienna, and her last doctor was the head of energy medicine from the university in her town. And I said, we need some of those guys over here. So I believe that. I think he's absolutely correct. Now, the meridian stress analysis, it's energy medicine, okay? That's what it does. I didn't know that. But 3 years ago, when I got this, homeopathy is actually have a lot to do with energy. The Beamer, which you guys know some about, that's energy medicine. That's PEMS, which is pulsing electromagnetic frequencies. We're all about energy, kiddo. Even the matter that makes us up is condensed energy. Okay, and here's the detoxification program. Look, you want to be sympathetic? Let's get some real good toxins in your body. It's not going to be happy. This program works really well. And then there's the old ionic foot bath, which you probably all know about. So here we go. Here's another one. I got this at the end. You love this?
Good one.
Isn't that great? Thank you for liking that. I was kind of wondering if I was going to do it or not. After I did the subtle art of not giving, I figured, what the heck, where could I go wrong here? This one talks about stretching in a relationship to the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay? Stretch. Look at my dog, Daisy. Every time she gets up, she stretches. Every time. It's a learning experience for me. But the answer to this question is, yeah, they saw a profound reaction. And this one I put in just because I thought it was fun. Isn't that great? Time, I don't should know that is a great healer. It's time. And obviously this talks about the benefits of exercise, okay? To me, when you exercise, you're using energy, okay? And sympathetic nervous system, you're creating energy. If you don't give it some place to go, it's going to go places you don't want it to go. Do you understand? Like twitches and stuff like that, and shaking, and not sleeping, right? Look, when you think you're about to be hit by a truck, do you think you want to go to sleep? That doesn't make sense. Unless your adrenals are totally not working, then it doesn't matter. Then you'll go to sleep for a really long time. Get it? I'm not going to play this for you because does anybody here? You were here last time, right? This again I'll do after we're done. Good old Buddha. To keep the body in good health is a duty. Otherwise, we shall not be able to keep our minds strong and clear. What do you know about that? Okay? So, how do you keep your body stronger than the stress you put it under? That's what that says. This is Clive. He's a patient of mine. He's one of the only people, I can do this, he told me I could. He's one of the only people I know that are hyper-parasympathetic. When you ask Clive how he's doing, well, I don't know. I guess I'm okay. You in any pain? I said, well, pain. Some maybe, some not. Okay, so what's happened in the parasympathetic relationship, his body isn't doing the stuff it's supposed to do. Like eat, heal, it's supposed to digest, you know? So this is what's going on with him. He's got something called, what would we like to call DISH, that's a good word, diffuse idiopathic spinal hypostosis, which means his whole spine's fused together. See it there? Now when we come back to that picture, you may think of the one, when you see the left as initial, you would think that Tara's holding his head up. She's not. He can't move any farther than that down. All right, they gave him an option. They said, do you want to be standing or sitting? Because they told him as time went on, he would not be able to move at all. So it's taken us 3 years, actually 4 now. He can put his head on the table, and I forgot to take the picture before he left. But I wanted you to see that that's making your body stronger than the stress you put it under. Okay? That make sense? Okay. Now in closing, I wanted to kind of give you the other side of this. I wasn't aware of, once I had children and how I was going to take care of them, that it was going to be an experiment. Okay? But my children, when Jeannie was pregnant with both of them, she took it to an extreme to make it so she exercised properly, ate perfectly, right? And didn't allow me to stress her out at all. Okay? So the theory is that if you take care of yourself when you're pregnant, the children when they're born are going to be better. But now that I've had children 37 and 33 years ago, they have children, right? Actually, yesterday was number 2 got here. Dun da da! Scary. I wanted to be in Vancouver. Oh God, did I want to be in Vancouver. But anyway, so this is my grandson. Now, my elder daughter, Sarah, didn't want me to really say anything or do anything as far as taking care of the kid when she was prenatal. She knew how to do that. And she was going to make sure that I didn't do anything. And Sarah has a tendency to make sure that whatever she does is different than what I wanted her to do, but it works out great. Now, when Yorma was born, the 2 characteristics here, I looked at them and it was like teary-eyed. And I look at on the left picture, look at the brightness in his eyes. I mean, that's health, right? And if you look to the right, if you look at his skin, you notice that it's flawless. Those are the 2 characteristics I use for a healthy child. Okay? So now, when I looked at my daughter, there wasn't an ounce of fluid on her that shouldn't have been there. So she took care of herself perfectly. All right? I just saw him yesterday, too. So anyway, it's a true philosophical possibility that you can regenerate health if you really take care of yourself. And the child didn't have any choice at all. Okay? Now, he's 18 months old now, or he's 2 years old, but when he was, when Sarah, his mom, was 6 months old, I read a book by a guy named Glenn Doman. It was called How to Teach Your Baby to Read. And he said he was a neurosurgeon, so what he had done is he was doing surgery on the children's brain, like taking half their brain out, you know, taking more than half of their brain out, and getting the children through a rehabilitative protocol that his daughter created to get them that they couldn't tell that they weren't normal. I thought that was pretty impressive. So we got the book, and Sarah could read a newspaper by the time she was 5 years old. Well, those cards have to be made. So Sarah said, I'll teach them this, but I don't have time to do the cards. So Jeannie and I were the card makers. I'm sorry you can't hear this one. So you get the idea. Now, this is a month later. He now has a vocabulary. He can read about 100 words. He's 2 years old. So my point being is how healthy can they actually be, right? It's called How to Teach Your Baby to Read by Glenn Doman. Now, it's my intention, from what you just saw, I'm not no bones about it. I want us to be the first line of defense. I want people to take care of themselves so the difficulties they're experiencing have taken out of the possibility that their health is not involved. Okay? So it says about 38% of the adults, 4 out of 10 are using alternative health care now, and 12% of the children. I haven't figured out the tipping point yet. Okay, you know the tipping point? It's like when a certain amount of people doing it and everybody does. Have you ever read the great book, Tipping Point? But anyway, there it is again. Okay? I want you to create sympathetic moments. Breathe. When it gets tough, breathe. Okay? So I appreciate you taking the time to be here. I felt a little unusual about putting this on here, but I did anyway. Look, if what I do makes sense to you, please tell others. Okay? Because there's no way we're going to get to the tipping point as well. And you guys know more people than I know. And hopefully I'll do my best to make it so that it's a good decision. Deal? Mm-hmm. So life is this is what I think life should be like. It should be like burning candles, and at the end you just flicker out, because you're going to anyway. Deal?
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, Jeannie's coming with dessert. I can hear it in the back.